If you've been with me since I launched this channel last year, you know we've been diving headfirst into some of the darkest corners of lost media, drifting through the vast digital ocean of the internet in search of what's missing. There's something endlessly unsettling about discussing a piece of media you can't watch, can't hear, can't touch. It creates this eerie sense of forbidden knowledge, something just out of reach. And that mystery is what drives countless web sleuths to scour old forums, dig through archives, and even search in the real world for fragments of media that seem to have vanished into thin air. Most of the time, the search comes up empty. The media stays lost. But sometimes, it resurfaces. Sometimes the sole owner, the only person in existence with a copy of the lost media, decides out of nowhere to release it. And whether it's in full or just a sliver, those moments are rare, strange, and often disturbing. That's our focus tonight. We're diving into some of the darkest found media, stories where the hunt actually paid off, at least partially. Because as fascinating as it is to imagine what could be on a lost tape or a missing file, there's something uniquely chilling about finally seeing it. Raw, real, and often not what you expected. So let's get into it. Let's take a look at some of the most unsettling lost media that has finally been found. On the night of October 31st, 1992, Halloween, something remarkable happened on British television. The BBC aired what appeared to be a live paranormal investigation called Ghostwatch, presented by real-life TV hosts Michael Parkinson, Sarah Green, Mike Smith, and Craig Charles, none of whom broke character or acknowledged any script. It depicted a haunted house investigation unraveling in real time on live TV. The horror that followed wasn't just on screen, it was national and very real. What started off as a one-off Halloween special became a media myth, a cultural trauma, and eventually a piece of lost media that would resurface decades later under an entirely new light. Ghostwatch's brilliance lies in its commitment to the bit. There were no disclaimers mid-broadcast, no on-screen warnings, no clear signs to distinguish it from a real-life program. In fact, it used actual BBC phone lines and presenters. The show begins slowly and innocuously. Green reports from the Northolt home of the Early family, plagued by strange knocks and disturbances. But as the story progresses, things spiral into unrelenting dread, culminating in the possession of the television studio itself and the presumed possession of Michael Parkinson by the malevolent spirit known as Pipes. Named by the children in the story after the clanging of pipes in the wall, Pipes becomes the face of one of the most infamous TV ghosts of all time. His lore is built through subtle imagery, whispered backstory, and blink and you'll miss it apparitions. It was all fiction, crafted meticulously by writer Stephen Volk and director Leslie Manning, but that distinction didn't matter to the viewers who believed it was unfolding live. Within hours, the BBC's switchboard was overwhelmed with complaints and concerns. Over 30,000 people reportedly called in, some convinced they had unleashed spirits into their own homes simply by watching it. The most tragic outcome was the reported suicide of Martin Denham, an 18-year-old with developmental disabilities, who left a note referencing Ghostwatch and his belief that the show had triggered a ghost haunting in his own house. The thing is, a good portion of the live broadcasts hinted that this entire thing was a national seance, where everyone watching potentially now had ghosts and demons in their homes. The backlash was swift and severe. The BBC, under fire, vowed never to air Ghostwatch again. The British tabloids ran headlines framing the broadcast as psychological warfare. Politicians and media regulators launched inquiries into the BBC's ethical responsibilities, and the Broadcasting Standards Commission issued a formal rebuke of the program, stating it had cultivated a sense of menace. And due to that, for years, Ghostwatch was buried. That is until 2002, where it finally received an official home release, and even that was quietly handled through the British Film Institute, not the BBC. For over a decade, it was a media legend, a ghost story in its own right. VHS rips floated through message boards and horror fan communities after 2002. Grainy clips were whispered about like forbidden footage. The BBC wouldn't even acknowledge it during Halloween programming blocks. This act of silencing only increased its mythos, turning Ghostwatch into a lost treasure of British horror and TV history. Though suppressed, Ghostwatch refused to die. Horror fans, found footage aficionados, and media scholars began rediscovering it, writing essays, praising its ahead-of-its-time commentary on media trust and trauma. The rise of creepypasta culture, analog horror, and found footage itself brought a renewed interest in fiction disguised as truth in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Ghostwatch was suddenly recontextualized not as a hoax, but as a foundational text in horror storytelling, a sophisticated experiment in narrative form that predated found footage trends by nearly a decade. In 2013, a documentary titled Ghostwatch Behind the Curtains was released, offering interviews with the cast and crew, exploring not just the making of the film, but the aftermath and trauma it left in its wake. The film gave it an official academic and cultural reevaluation, allowing even skeptics to appreciate its impact. Eventually, streaming services caught on. In 2016, Ghostwatch was finally added to the BBC store as part of their Halloween horror collection. Then came the big leap. In 2017, horror streaming platform Shudder acquired the rights to Ghostwatch and made it available to US audiences for the first time in an official capacity. What had once been buried, almost as a source of national shame, was now being celebrated. Ghostwatch's impact didn't stop with streaming. Fans began to treat the original broadcast as a yearly ritual. Every Halloween, online communities host a virtual rewatch known as the National Seance, complete with hashtags, commentary, and even fake call-ins. For horror lovers, it's become a kind of secular Halloween sacrament. Ghostwatch remains a perfect case study. It was once lost by force, pulled from circulation, denied legitimacy, and later found through grassroots interest and academic curiosity. Unlike media lost through time, decay, or neglect, Ghostwatch was buried intentionally, which makes its reappearance all the more poetic. It represents a form of media resurrection that happens not through discovery in an attic or archive, but through cultural reappraisal and demand.
What's the problem there?
They just killed my friend!
What's the problem with your friend? I need to know.
The police come! With a gun! With a gun!
In the vast, unsettling archive of American tragedy, few events have seared themselves into public memory, quite like the story of Travis the chimpanzee. It was a grotesque blend of the surreal and the horrific. A domesticated animal once featured in commercials and television appearances, suddenly snapping in a brutal act of violence. But what lingers most viscerally for many isn't just the news coverage or grainy images from 2009. It's the audio. A 911 call, frantic, shocking. For a time, this recording seemed to vanish, surviving only in paraphrased retellings and fading news reports. Then it slowly returned, resurfaced, and spread. A piece of lost media reclaimed, a trauma re-etched into the internet's memory. This is the story of that incident, and how its most haunting document was found. Travis wasn't just any chimpanzee. Raised in Stamford, Connecticut by Sandra Harold, he was a local celebrity. Adopted at just 3 days old, he was bottle-fed, wore clothes, bathed regularly, brushed his teeth, and reportedly even drank wine from a stemmed glass. By the standards of most, he wasn't just domesticated, he was humanized. Travis starred in Old Navy and Coca-Cola commercials and had a short appearance on the Maury Povich show. To neighbors and friends, he was part of the family, part of the community. But beneath the novelty of a 200-pound primate wearing baseball jerseys and flipping through photo albums was a much more dangerous truth. Chimpanzees, no matter how familiar they become, are still wild animals with immense strength, unpredictable behavior, and instinctual drives that no amount of training or affection can fully erase. Travis was approaching middle age, well past the point when most chimps become volatile. On February 16, 2009, something triggered Travis. It might have been confusion, rage, or neurological instability, possibly worsened by Lyme disease or Xanax, which Sandra Harold admitted to giving him, something that can trigger psychosis in primates. That afternoon, Harold called over her friend Charla Nash to help lure Travis back inside after he had escaped from the home. Without warning, Travis snapped, attacking Nash with unrelenting force. He tore off her hands, nose, lips, and eyelids. Sandra Harold, helpless and terrified, retreated to her home and called 911.
Send the police!
What's the problem there?
The chimp killed my friend!
What's the problem with your friend? I need to know.
Send the police up! With a gun! With a gun! He ripped her face off!
He ripped her face off?
He tried to attack me! Please,
Okay,
hurry!
I need you to calm down a little bit. They're on the way.
Please, hurry up! He's killing my girlfriend!
241 Rock Raymond Road. They're saying someone has a gun and trying to kill somebody.
Hurry up!
They're on the way, but I need you to give me more information. Who's doing this?
With guns!
Who has the guns?
They'll bring the guns! You gotta kill this chimp! Chimp!
What's the problem there?
Hurry up!
I need you to talk to me. I need you to calm down. Why do you need somebody there?
What? Please, Gus!
What is the problem?
He's killing my friend!
Who's killing your friend?
Chimp, my chimpanzee! She's dead! She's dead!
Why are you saying that she's dead?
She's dead! He ripped her apart!
He ripped what apart? Her face?
Everything!
In the original broadcast reporting the attack, segments of the 911 call were described but not released. Journalists did paraphrase Harold's panic, but for years the recording was absent from the public sphere. The reasons were likely manifold: legal concerns, the disturbing nature of the content, and respect for the victim. But as the internet's obsession with forbidden media grew, particularly within horror and true crime communities, so did speculation about the call. Clips appeared in forums, but they were often edited or unverifiable. Was the call real? Was it exaggerated? What exactly did Sandra say? Then slowly, the full audio emerged. As you can hear, it is horrifying. Even to those who thought that they were prepared, said it was a terrifying experience to listen to. Harold's voice, trembling and shrieking, pleading for help. The dispatcher stunned but trying to remain composed. The sound of unfiltered human terror. And the sound of a wild primate in a clear manic episode, caught in a fit of rage. After the call had happened, police arrived and were forced to kill Travis. The event absolutely destroyed Harold. Her good friend had been mutilated, and Travis, who was ostensibly her child, was put down, feeling probably betrayed by Harold. Charla Nash did survive, but barely. She underwent multiple surgeries. Her story is one of unthinkable pain and extraordinary resilience. She sued Sandra Harold and the state of Connecticut, and her case became the flashpoint for laws banning the private ownership of exotic animals. Sandra died a year later of an aneurysm. Travis's story has since become a grim folk legend. He is referenced in memes, urban legends, podcasts, horror discussions. A version of him even appeared in Jordan Peele's film Nope, that attempted to sort of recreate the event but in a different context. The Travis the Chimp 911 call is more than just a disturbing recording. It's a case study in how our society interacts with darkness. It was hidden for a reason, then it was found, and now it's everywhere. On the night of February 20th, 2003, in the small town of West Warwick, Rhode Island, a crowd of over 460 people gathered inside the station, a cozy rock venue known for its intimate atmosphere and loud high-energy shows. That night's headliner was the 1980s rock band Great White, who were making their way across the country on a nostalgia-fueled tour. It was supposed to be just another night of music, beer, and camaraderie for the fans packed shoulder to shoulder inside the club, which was way beyond capacity. But within minutes of the band taking the stage, the evening transformed into one of the most infamous tragedies in American live entertainment history. The venue known as the station had a long history. Built in 1946, it began life as a humble gin mill on the outskirts of West Warwick. Over the decades, it changed hands and purposes, shifting from a roadside restaurant to a neighborhood pub, and eventually transforming into a live music nightclub by the early 1990s. The station had become a staple of the Rhode Island rock scene, especially for hard rock and metal acts. Its small size and low ceiling created an intimate, high-energy experience. But those same features would later on prove deadly. Despite its popularity and frequent sold-out crowds, the venue's licensing and safety adaptations never fully caught up with its role as a high-capacity concert space. The building retained the bones of an older structure, not a modern live music venue. And as it evolved, so did the risks. In late 2002, the club underwent 2 separate fire safety inspections. The first flagged only a handful of minor violations, things like the exit doors that didn't swing outward and a few burnt-out bulbs above the emergency exits. The inspectors noted the need for these fixes, but somehow overlooked the most dangerous element in the building, the highly flammable polyurethane foam that lined the walls and ceiling around the stage. This wasn't professional grade, fire retardant acoustic paneling. This was the kind of foam you might find protecting electronics in shipping crates. Cheap, effective at deadening sound, but catastrophically unsafe in a public space. And yet the foam was considered one of the station's selling points. Michael and Jeffrey Derderian, the brothers who owned and managed the club, valued the foam for its acoustic benefits. Bands sounded bigger, cleaner, and more powerful in the room, and the brothers were aware of the praise the venue's sound quality received. To them, the foam was part of the club's identity. Whether they understood the true hazard it posed, or chose to ignore it, remains a matter of controversy. What's certain is that they did not remove it. The second fire inspection came not long after the first. Strangely, this time the building passed entirely, even though the foam was still present and unmodified. It remains unclear whether this was due to a lack of inspector training on the dangers of polyurethane foam or simply an oversight. Either way, the deadliest hazard in the building remained in place, waiting for the wrong spark. And sparks had flown before. The station had a history of allowing pyrotechnics inside this small club. On multiple occasions, such as during a performance by a KISS tribute band, fire effects had been used without incident. This seemed to reinforce the belief among the owners and the staff that it was safe enough, but the foam still lined the stage, hanging overhead and stretching behind the band, essentially forming a highly combustible frame around the performers. All it needed was a moment of contact with the sparks. On February 20th, 2003, that moment came. On the night of February 20th, 2003, the station was packed wall to wall with over 460 people. At 11:07 p.m., Great White's frontman, Jack Russell, stepped up to the microphone and launched into their song, Desert Moon. Behind him, tour manager Daniel Beachell prepared the night's opening visual. 4 floor-mounted pyrotechnic gerbs, 2 angled at 45 degrees and then 2 vertical, each designed to shoot 15-foot columns of white-hot sparks for about 15 seconds. It's important to note that the Dadarian brothers did not clear Beachell to install these gerbs, but he did it anyway without telling them. As the first notes rang out, the sparks erupted in a blinding cascade. The crowd roared, bathed in the glow. At first, it felt like pure rock and roll spectacle, but less than 9 seconds later, those sparks reached the highly flammable polyurethane foam lining the walls above and to the sides of the stage. Specifically, the 45-degree angle gerbs were the culprit, as they aimed directly at the walls. And then, ignition. At first, the flames were small, curling along the foam seams, and many in the crowd assumed it was all part of the show, so there was no panic just yet. But within 20 seconds, the fire climbed upwards, racing across the foam with terrifying speed. The flames licked the ceiling, dark smoke began to gather above the stage, and the first flicker of alarm rippled through the audience. The audience especially knew something was wrong when the frontman, Jack Russell, said, The band then fled the stage a second later. Within 40 seconds, the smoke turned black and thick, pouring outward from the stage in choking waves. 1 minute after the pyrotechnics began, visibility in the main room plummeted. The lights dimmed under the smoke, the air filled with the sharp, acrid bite of burning chemicals, and the crowd shifted from excitement to confusion to panic. What happened next was a perfect storm of human instinct, crowd behavior, and dangerously inadequate building design. Although the station had multiple exits, 2 side doors, a back kitchen exit, and the main entrance, most patrons instinctively turned towards the front door, the same way they had come in just minutes earlier. It is also important to note that one of the back doors was being blocked by a bouncer, as it was said by him that that door was for the band and only the band. As said, most of the patrons instinctively turned towards the front door. This is a well-documented survival bias. In moments of panic, people tend to seek out familiar routes rather than searching for alternatives. Unfortunately, the front entrance of the station was not designed to handle the hundreds of people at once. The layout made matters even worse. To reach the outside, patrons had to pass through a small entryway that funneled everyone into a narrow hallway before the final set of double doors. That hallway quickly became a choke point as bodies pressed forward faster than people could exit. Within seconds, the space was packed wall to wall, and those at the front found themselves pinned, unable to move forward, and with the weight of dozens of people crushing them from behind and on top of them. There were literally layers of human bodies stuck in this choke point. While the crowd jammed at the front door, the fire above the stage moved with shocking speed. Burning polyurethane foam doesn't just burn, it flashes, producing rolling waves of flame that lick across ceilings in seconds, almost as if small little bombs are going off. As the fire raced overhead, molten flaming debris began to rain down on the people trapped inside, and at the same time, the foam released superheated toxic gases, including hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide, that could knock a person unconscious after just a few breaths. Those still trying to escape by the front row were now facing three lethal forces at once: extreme heat, suffocating toxic smoke, and crushing pressure from people behind and on top of them. Some collapsed in the doorway and were trampled. Others were overcome by fumes before they could even reach the bottleneck. Meanwhile, many of the side and rear exits remained underused. Some people didn't know they existed. Others couldn't see them through the thick black smoke that filled the club within a minute. And tragically, a few exits were partially obstructed. Many people began punching out and kicking in windows to escape, which ended up being a very smart way to get out of the venue. The narrow hallway and doors jammed with bodies, people desperately pushing forward, screaming for air, clawing at anything that might move them closer to safety. Those in front were crushed against the doorway, pinning so tightly they couldn't lift their arms. As more people surged forward, the pressure became inescapable. Some victims died standing upright, trapped in place, their bodies held in position by the weight of the crowd behind them. As you can see here, the doors are opened, but there is literally a block, a layer of human bodies just stuck in the passageway. By the time firefighters arrived, just minutes later, the front entrance had indeed become a mound of human bodies several layers deep. Rescuers had to physically pull people free, often finding that the ones closest to the door had already gone still. In the end, 100 people lost their lives, and more than 200 were injured. The majority of the dead, as shown by this image, were found clustered near the main entrance. Many just feet from the outside world, where breathable air still existed. Others were found inside, scattered near the bar or in the main room or in the sunroom. Smoke inhalation was the primary cause of death. The local hospitals were immediately overwhelmed. Ambulances ran non-stop, ferrying victims to every available emergency room in the surrounding area. Some patients arrived in full cardiac arrest. Others were severely burned, their lungs damaged beyond repair from the superheated air they had inhaled. Medical staff worked frantically to triage, intubate, and stabilize the injured, but the sheer scale of the disaster pushed the region's emergency response system to its breaking point. The horror of the station fire was made uniquely chilling by the fact that it was caught on tape. That night, a local news crew from WPRI-TV was there to cover a story about nightclub safety, ironically enough. Cameraman Brian Butler happened to be filming as the fire ignited, capturing the flames' frightening acceleration, crowds' slow realization, and the sudden rush towards the exits. This footage would later become one of the most viewed and dissected disaster clips in the internet age, not just because of its visceral impact, but because it offered an almost real-time record of a deadly tragedy unfolding. While the most famous clip, the ignition and chaos inside the club, was broadcast in news reports, certain segments were held back, either due to ongoing investigations, the graphic nature of the content, or legal restrictions tied to wrongful death lawsuits. Over the years, rumors spread online about additional footage. Moments from inside the club not seen in the news reports, and exterior shots showing the scale of the fire and the desperate rescue attempts. Survivors and amateur fire investigators claimed that certain angles or sequences had been removed or suppressed. Some said the unseen footage included moments after the cameraman exited the building, showing the victim still trapped in the bottleneck at the front door. For a long time, this material was believed to be lost or locked away permanently, existing only in court archives or in the raw news tapes. For those fascinated by lost media, it became a sort of grim holy grail, evidence of a historic tragedy that was simultaneously too important and too disturbing to be forgotten. In the late 2010s and early 2020s, portions of this missing footage began to resurface online. Some clips were uploaded to video platforms by amateur archivists and citizen journalists, often ripped from courtroom exhibits or public records releases. These extended sequences show more of the chaos outside, the frantic attempts to pull people from the jammed doorway, the fire engulfing the building's entire structure, and the desperate work of first responders as victims lay on the pavement. The resurfacing of this footage is not just an exercise in morbid curiosity. It serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly disaster can strike in public spaces and how small oversights can turn deadly. Thank you for joining me again tonight for another episode of the Darkives. Halloween is coming, y'all. I'm excited. We have a lot planned to release content-wise during the season, so stay tuned for that. Thanks again for 1 year of the Darkives. This is the official end of Season 2, and Season 3 will officially open with our Halloween episodes. Thanks so much again. Remember to check us out on Twitch. And as always, stay safe out there.